Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat. Resolves.
Right.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, my name is DJ. This is the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. And you know, a lot of times we complain about how expensive our mana bases are in our commander decks. Lands are so expensive, but these ones are out of control. We're going to talk about the most expensive lands that you can play in Commander and whether they're worth the money. If you want to pick up some of these outrageous lands or the reasonable alternatives I'm going to mention, go ahead and check out COOLSTUFFINC. They've got cool stuff on their website. And when you do, use the coupon code JUMBO5 to save 5% off your order. Let's go from least expensive to most expensive, starting off with City of Shadows. City of Shadows is a land. Tap, exile a creature you control, put a storage counter on City of Shadows. Tap, add X mana to your mana pool, where X is the number of storage counters on City of Shadows. So this enters the battlefield and immediately taps for no mana. Spectacular. It's immediately useless. And then when you sacrifice your first creature, which by the way requires a tap ability, so you can't even use it for mana that turn, it'll tap for 1 colorless mana. Finally, the next turn, when you sacrifice another creature, adding another storage counter, it can tap for 2 mana. That is ridiculous. It takes so long for this to finally generate good value, and it takes real relevant creatures the entire time. This land is $170. It is the cheapest land on this list, and it is totally not worth it. But hang on, there are some decks that play City of Shadows. Let's think about a card like Yasova Dragonclaw. You're stealing your opponent's creature, and so you want a land that can easily and cheaply sacrifice it, and if you do that enough times, then you have a big chonky land. How about Raynar the Ever Watchful, which gives you a benefit when you exile things? Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, a deck that really wants lots of dinky, irrelevant creatures and also has Proliferate on the card. Speaking of Proliferate, Atraxa Praetor's Voice. So if you have one of these decks, is City of Shadows worth it? What's the verdict on this card? No, it's so slow. It's only somewhat playable in these fringe conditions, and in many situations, you would have rather had just a random other land. For the next land, we jump up almost $100. We have City of Traders. City of Traders says when you play another land, sacrifice City of Traders. But it adds 2 mana to your mana pool. This is coming in at $260. And you know that you can play lands after you play an Ancient Tomb, right? Like, I guess this is your second copy of Ancient Tomb or third copy or something like that. You know, City of Traders might be good if the game is ending or if the top of your curve is like right as you play this card. In fact, this is going to be good in Legacy, where all you need to do is land that Show and Tell or that Painter's Servant just a tiny bit faster. But in our format, we need our land drops. And so this could actively be bad for your deck. If you move towards this type of card and you think that it's good, well, odds are it's not. My verdict, this is not worth $260 unless you're playing Legacy Sneak and Show. If you're playing Commander, this could be actively bad for your strategy, and it could trick you into thinking you're playing this really powerful land when in most situations, you're just going down on mana, counteracting your other ramp in your deck. All right, the next category is 10 lands in one. This is where I'm putting the dual lands. The cheapest dual land is $350, and the most expensive one is around $833. So a pretty big range. Now, let's talk about the duals. I'm going to use Underground Sea as an example. Underground Sea is an island and a swamp and taps for blue and black. Enters the battlefield untapped. It is, in many cases, strictly better than a basic land. And that's one of the problems. Wizards has said it's kind of a mistake to make lands that are strictly better than basics. There are lands that have certain trade-offs that some people are okay with, but Underground Sea is just better than an island or better than a swamp in almost every situation, except maybe a Blood Moon. Oh, getting off track. Okay. So do we need duels? Well, they are amazing. They're untapped, they're fetchable, they're in many cases better than that basic land, but are they worth the price? No, because there's so many other lands that fulfill the same purpose. And in many situations, you could fetch a tapped Triome and fix your mana even better, or fetch and pay 2 life, which could be inconsequential to your game. So the amount of money you're paying for that tiny bit of value, that little bit of equity, is totally not worth it in most situations. So the verdict? That these are totally replaceable. Get other better dual lands. But they might be technically correct, which is why a lot of people seek them, because they are the best, even though they're only the best by a tiny margin for a huge price tag. Next up, we have Serra's Sanctum. Serra's Sanctum is a legendary land. It taps to add white to your mana pool for each enchantment you control. Serra's Sanctum is $338. Now, this only works if you have a critical mass of enchantments. You need a lot of them for Serra's Sanctum to work. So you don't just throw this into a white deck if it happens to have a couple Oblivion Rings. It just won't work. But lands that tap for lots of mana, for tap that more than 2, are usually insane. Like, they're very good. And so the top end on this card in an Enchantress deck is really good. So if you have an Enchantress deck, which by the way is a very narrow deck, this effect is huge, and it's irreplaceable and super powerful. I'm sorry, it is actually quite good. Whether it's worth $338 is up to you, but it's one of those lands that has a powerful effect that's not easily substituted. Next, we have Elephant Graveyard. It's a land that taps for a colorless mana, and you can tap it to regenerate target elephant. This is coming in at $395. I have to ask you, how many elephants are you playing in your deck? But actually, there are a few elephant commanders out there that you should be aware of. There's Hamza, Guardian of Arashin. There's Lochiel, Clockwork Scholar. There are also changeling commanders that are technically elephants. There's Morophon the Boundless, Orvar the Allform, or Mistform Ultimus. All of those would definitely benefit from having commander protection, this regeneration, sitting on an untapped land. So this is technically really good, but only in a tiny portion of decks. But I'm just waiting for them to print another really powerful changeling. I mean, they printed Morophon and Orvar. Those are pretty powerful changelings, but I'm waiting for that big competitive elephant to come out here and the price tag to soar in this. But look here, do you play Yavimaya Hollow in your green decks? This is another reserveless card. It's also an expensive land, but do you play it? That regeneration isn't quite worth it, even at Yavimaya Hollow's price tag. You might not even be okay with having that colorless land in your deck. You want more fixing or more reliability. And so if you're not running Yavimaya Hollow, then don't feel sad about missing out on something more narrow like Elephant Graveyard. All right, our next card, we're gonna do a little bit of a jump in price. We just came from around $400, and we're gonna go all the way up to $775 for Island of Wak Wak. Island of Wak Wak is a land. It does not produce any mana, but if you tap it, the power of target creature with flying becomes 0 until end of turn. Oh my gosh. No, this is totally not worth it. What are you talking about? I mean, do any of you even play Maze of Ith anymore? It feels like that's a land drop that works better than Island of Wak Wak, but it doesn't see as much play because people have realized that the fact that it doesn't tap for mana and eats up your land drop is kind of a big thing, and also only affecting a single creature. Now just imagine it does all of those same downsides, but it only affects creatures with flying? That's a minority of creatures. It also costs $775. The verdict is absolutely not at all. Next up, we have Diamond Valley. Land, tap, sacrifice a creature. You gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. This is coming in at $875. And once again, it doesn't tap for mana. Some people are going to play Diamond Valley because of the quick sacrifice outlet. People like Child of Alara decks. But I think Child of Alara decks needs better fixing and doesn't need a useless land. Maybe if you're running that Yasova Dragon Claw deck and you need to sacrifice your opponent's creatures, it seems ridiculous that you have a threaten-based creature strategy and you're playing an $875 card. Maybe this card is just for trolling. The verdict is they're better sacrifice outlets and it's not worth the money. Next up is Gaia's Cradle. Gaia's Cradle is a legendary land. Tap to add a green to your mana pool for each creature you control. Yeah, actually, this is really, really good. Lands that can tap for multiple mana are at a premium. They're by definition very good. And just getting creatures on the battlefield is a really easy hoop for Gaia's Cradle to sort of capitalize on this big mana. It's incredibly easy to turn on, and Gaia's Cradle oftentimes taps for, 5 or 10 mana. Legacy Elves decks use this to go off and sort of storm off with elves and creatures and extra cradles and stuff like that. So yeah, Gaia's Cradle is really, really good. And the verdict is, sorry, bad news. This is incredibly expensive, incredibly powerful. It's on the reserved list, so it's not going to be reprinted. And people know how powerful it is, so the price tag isn't going to go down at all either. And so Gaia's Cradle is this very difficult to get, unattainable, expensive card, but has the power level to match it. It really does give you huge influxes of mana that can help you win games. But there are a few ways around it. Number one, there are some world champ cards. Those are gold bordered cards that you can get, and almost every commander table out there will let you play it. The problem is that you have a not tournament legal card that you're paying over $200 for. Here's my go-to. If you have a play group that is budget conscious along with you and they're okay with this, I would take a Growing Rites of Itlimoc and then just flip it over and have it be Itlimoc Cradle of the Sun and have that be your substitute for Gaia's Cradle. It's got Cradle in the name. A lot of times your opponents will be like, okay, yeah, I'll accept that. One thing that kind of stinks is that both of these things require a conversation before the game even starts. Hey, by the way, I have a gold border Cradle, or I have a Cradle that's actually an Itlimoc in this deck. And that could be an awkward conversation to begin with, and you might not even want that. But do you know what? I would take 100 awkward conversations for $1,000. So I think, or just don't play Cradle. It is really good and fun to play though, so I would give some of these other alternate methods a good try. Mishras Workshop is a land. Tap to add 3 mana to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells. We were talking about how 2 mana is a lot. 3 mana is crazy. That's so good. But the fact that you need artifacts is a bigger hoop than you're thinking of. Like, granted, if we are ramping into Traxos on turn 2 from our command zone, that's just phenomenal. You're playing your Panharmonicons early, your Solemns early, like everything is curved out in an insane sort of super soul ring turn. It's fantastic. The top end is crazy. But one thing is that even in artifact decks, it can be clunky. I have a Mardu artifact deck, and you'd be surprised at how often Mishra's Workshop doesn't quite curve as well as you want. Like, it doesn't curve into both of my commanders, they're partners. It curves into some of my stuff, but a lot of times I need colored pips too, or I'm tapping it, not using all of the mana available. It also doesn't help me filter. So if I play a Signet, I can't help filter that into more mana. So there are definitely some downsides to Mishra's Workshop. But for the most part, if your deck is built correctly, like it's a house. One other thing that you want to keep in mind is that there actually aren't very many artifact commanders. And so the demand for Mishra's Workshop isn't super high. If you look at colorless commanders, like half of them are Eldrazi, and Mishra's Workshop doesn't work on Eldrazi. And so you're looking at things like Traxos or like Karn, Silver Golem. And those are very specific decks that don't have, general love throughout the entire population. And so all it's going to take is one super popular artifact commander to maybe make Mishra's Workshop go up in price a lot. I am not telling you to buy a $1,200 card by any means in hopes that they'll print a crazy artifact commander, but that's just kind of how I see the world. So we'll all just stand back and not buy Mishra's Workshops, and then it'll happen and we'll see the price go up and we'll be like, well, the DJ said so. Don't know if I'd do anything different. All right, next up we have the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. This is coming in at $3,888. If we were complaining about Mishra's Workshops and Gaia's Cradles, what on earth is this land doing? Okay, so it's a legendary land that says all creatures have at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this creature unless you pay 1. This is a land that does not tap for mana. So again, I'm immediately against it, but this is really powerful. I'm actually glad that it's this expensive because it can be brutal against creature strategies. I had this card in a Land Matters control style deck where I could fetch it with Crop Rotation or Expedition Match. It's run in Legacy lands. You can fetch it in similar ways. And combined with stack pieces, it really makes it difficult for people to actually stick creatures on the battlefield. And so it is a powerful control piece. There could be a little bit of a mismatch between this land, its power, its saltiness, and your play group. And in my mind, that makes it not worth $3,888. And the final land we have on our list is Bazaar of Baghdad. Bazaar of Baghdad is a land that says tap it to draw 2 cards, then discard 3 cards. Again, doesn't tap for mana. Ugh. Bazaar of Baghdad is coming in at $5,000. Okay, so ramp and card draw are 2 of the most critical pieces of Commander. Like, it's a basic part of our format. This does not tap for mana and uses up a land drop, so it unramps you, and it provides card disadvantage. You draw 2, discard 3. So this is used heavily in like Dredge, and where your graveyard is way more of your hand than your actual hand is. And so dumping as many cards in there is really, really important. In Commander, this could be a huge liability. We have to think, like, is Dredge viable in Commander? Are there Dredge decks? A couple, you know what I mean? Will Dredge ever be sort of a big thing in Commander? Maybe, you know? And so maybe that future sight lets you think, okay, you know, I will one day want this like powerful Dredge synergy. And so maybe Bazaar of Baghdad could be something I want to pick up. There are some corner case scenarios that exist right now. Rael the Everwise, Gitrog Monster, other graveyard strategies that desperately want you to just throw as many things in your graveyard as possible, even at the cost of mana, mana ramp and card advantage. But in most situations, this card is just bad. Yeah, so my verdict is not worth $5,000. There will be plenty of ways for you to get things in your graveyard. I promise. You don't need to have this specific card. So my overall conclusion, you don't need any of these cards. They're all overpriced. They're all on the reserved list. They're all status symbols and expensive collector's items, much more than useful cards for Commander. So ignore them. Stick them out of your mind after I spent 20 minutes talking to you about them, and focus on what works in your decks. And in many situations, other utility lands will be just as good, if not better. These are also like so rare and expensive that they might even feel out of place at Commander tables. Maybe you play a Bazaar of Baghdad and you're doing something totally fair and might even be, undoing some of your ramp and card draw, and people look at you and are like, oh, you're playing the $5,000 card? Swing. Like, they might actually attack you. It might be a bad thing for winning games. And so think about how all of these cards not only impact your individual Commander decks, but your overall meta, your play group, your perception, your wallet, all of those things. All right. Thanks so much for joining me for this top 10 list. Are there any cards that you think are a strict necessity? Like, people need to be buying this land right now? Leave that in the comments down below. I say you don't need any of them, but I want you guys to argue with me so that we can get the best advice possible to Commander players out there. And if you are thinking about picking up any great lands, check out Cool Stuff Inc. because they sponsor the entire Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. And when you do, use the coupon code JUMBO5 because that's going to save you 5% off your order. I want to thank my patrons. They're amazing. They support this channel every single day. Thank you, patrons. And thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for that subscription. I really appreciate it because it helps the channel so much. So thank you. And have a great one. Bye-bye, everyone.